Welcome to Black Muse. My name is Doris Davenport, correspondent for Black Muse podcast. I am so absolutely excited, like over the moon beyond joy excited, to be interviewing a longtime friend of mine, somebody that many of you know, and those of you who don't, by the time you finish listening to this conversation, you're going to be so glad that now you know a little bit about this lady. I'm talking about the executive director, visionary, founder of Little Black Pearl Workshop, Monica Haslip. Monica Haslip, welcome to Black Muse.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Doris.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually better than good.
Yeah?
Yeah, this is a beautiful time for me. I love summer.
Oh, yeah.
I'm excited about the beautiful weather, so yeah, it's all good.
You know, when I came in here, every time I come here, it's like walking into a new place. The first question that I have for you is, how often do you renovate or redesign or cycle the work? Because truly, every time I've come, it is like walking into a brand new space.
You know, it's kind of tied to my beliefs about how to sustain organizations, and I just happen to believe that we have to pay attention to what's happening around us. And so everything that happens in this place is really driven by what's happening in the community, what the needs are of the people. And so I've learned over the years, this is like my 29th year, so I've learned over the years that in order to be relevant and in order to really offer to people services and activities and events that really are meaningful to them, I have to make adjustments along the way and not be afraid to change. I think everything is about change. You know, it's important for us to have that opportunity to change. And so I'm a space person. I love design. So when COVID happened, it was the first time in years that I had time to sit at home and really do some deep reflection. And during that time, I really thought about what we all needed, which was spaces of belonging, spaces where we could potentially work, because many of us we're not going back to offices. I created the food and wellness center, or market, basically, to offer healthier food options, but also to expand the narrative about an African American icon, Dr. George Washington Carver. So, you know, it's
some would have us believe it's no more than just a peanut
man, right? Yeah. So it's really, to answer that question, I would say that I'm always reflective, and I'm always looking at what is happening around me, and I'm trying to be responsive to that, whether it is a shift in the space or a shift in programming. But, you know, it's always about growth and moving forward.
Well, Monica, I have known you a long time.
Yes.
Decades.
Yeah.
And I know you have a lot of fans, and I count myself as one of your biggest.
Oh, thank you.
You know, what kind of a little girl was Monica? Because I have seen you envision. I watched you envision this. I've seen you you are not afraid of the thoughts that travel from ear to ear. Many of us are.
Yeah.
How do you, what was Monica the little girl like?
Well, you know what, I
what
honestly,
was your mother?
My mother was amazing. My father was interesting, but I was a child who was a little sickly. I had asthma growing up, and so I was always inside a lot, and my mother was very protective as a result of that, and I spent a lot of time drawing and finding ways to keep myself busy while my siblings and friends were outside playing. So, you know, I think I learned to appreciate my internal sort of creativity, and I was an interesting looking child. So I never really focused on the outside. I was always focusing on how could I be the best person I could be inside, because I felt that was going to be the thing that I had to rely on. So even as a kid, I was always thinking about how to be my best self. And my mom, who was an incredible example of courage and power, she went all the way to the federal Supreme Court and won a case. It took her 9 years. I watched that.
Never giving up.
Yeah, and that had a huge impact on me, although I didn't realize it was doing that then. So I think for me, just always having that kind of like complete love from my parents and my siblings, and it invited me to be comfortable in my own skin, which gave me probably a bit more courage than most. So I'm always encouraging parents to love your kids, love them as they are, and find what's good in them and nurture that.
And don't say no so much.
Yeah, well, my mom said no a lot because I needed no a lot, but it was a healthy balance. And she saw that I was gifted as an artist and put me in art school in high school, which was really great because I lived in a black community and I went to a school with predominantly white children, and it sort of prepared me for the life I have now. Where I feel comfortable going into any space.
That's important.
Yeah.
Especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
Because we live in a day and age now where people want to hear what you have to say if you've proven that you can, affect change. And when you get in those spaces, if you have that level of comfort, you find that there are often ears to hear.
Yeah.
So I always like to have our audience get to know who we're talking about before we get into what they've done. So we're on that journey of who is Monica.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thing because you've talked a bit about your mom and your dad and how you were brought up. And if I look at your work, your whole body of work, and it's vast, it's diverse, it's even complex, I think would be a good word.
Sure.
You and I can speak for myself when you walk into Little Black Pearl Workshop. The first feeling that I feel is a sense of love. It's a sense of belonging. It's a sense of, wow, if I could be in this space every day, all day, what a level of confidence, anyone would have. Yeah. Where did you get that? I mean, okay, I get your family.
Well, I think
how do you maintain it
that
too?
in my own spirituality and beliefs. I think your beliefs define what happens in your life, and it has taken me being on my own journey to really sort of develop my own relationship with God and the universe. And so as a result of that, as my clarity strengthened and my faith strengthened, then it became easier when things were challenging. I could see beyond it, and I could have faith that I could see myself past whatever the barrier was. So it just I think I also have done a lot of work on myself. I'm a racial healing practitioner and trainer, and so that work has invited me to look at my own life and look at my own journey and my own biases and beliefs. And as a result of that, I have focused on love. I realized that, even with the children that we serve here, the reason they do well and the reason they graduate and all of that had to do more with the love that they encounter when they're in this space than anything else. You know, the team that works here, we have over probably 37, 8 people working here, and you know, I look for people who have that same kind of spirit and that same kind of energy, who believe in the power of love. And so when you come in the space, you know, I always tell people everything in a space in this place, in some way I've touched. I usually design all the spaces, and so I'm always thinking about people. I'm always thinking about what I want them to feel. And so I think that's how people feel that kind of love, because whatever your intention is, whatever you put into it, it's really what you're going to get out of it at the end of the day. So that's been my sort of mantra, to really let love lead. And then, you know, everything else kind of works itself out along the way.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I watched you work in the darkroom at Johnson Publishing Company. Probably, really, and you know, we know all the alumni that were there, but I think your eyes have probably seen more of the history of that company than anybody else.
Yeah.
Because you were the one publishing all of the work. I mean, the artwork, all of the photographs. While I might have been the last eyes on Ebony Man magazine before it went to the typesetters, every piece of art that went into that magazine had to come through your shop, your light box, and, and then BET. I mean, and here's the thing about you: people would look at the set of skills required to work in a darkroom. Trust me, far exceeded that, obviously, because you went from there to BET and advertising, excelled, went around the country, and you, all the while, it is almost as if the birth of Little Black Pearl was taking shape. Because once you made the decision, I remember riding around with you to find your first building, and that whole process. And you turned your home into an after-school program that you literally opened your doors to strangers, kids that a lot of people would say, you know, shoo, we don't want you here. You trusted them in your home, and you showered them with love, and you taught them skills. And then you moved from there, which I think was about 2000.
I built this place in 2005. And
you went from how many square feet to?
2,000 square feet to 42,000 square feet.
Just because you could?
Well, sort of,
or because you dreamed that you could?
I think it was a combination of, you know, thinking about, you know, my mind is often set on the future and what I am moving towards. And so when I was in my house for 11 years. And a lot of people think somehow this place magically sort of was created, but I did some of my most foundational work in my house. You know, it helped me to really define what I was doing and why I was doing it. I actually, you know, I went through a really dark period in my house because I was building and I ran out of money, and I was too embarrassed to tell my mom or my family, because I had worked at BET and I had been at Johnson Publishing. You know, there was a certain kind of lifestyle that I had gotten sort of locked into. And when I ran out of money, while I was building Little Black Pearl, or while I thought I was building Little Black Pearl, I learned the most important lessons. You know, I think that it helped me to have a level of empathy and compassion that shapes what I do now. So when people come to the door here and they may need something that that resonates with me because I've been there, and so it's easier to think about what people might need because I've already experienced that need myself, and so I share that information with people because I don't want people to have the impression that this has been like a quick, easy journey. You know, it is, it's the discipline that you have to develop in order to sustain through what is inevitably going to be some challenges while you're building. And so that 11 years in my house, really, I'm very, very grateful for that. I see young people who are now grown who are doing incredible things that started in my house. And they still stay in touch with me, and they call me and say, Monica, I'm running for office, or I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And it let me know that, you know, even in that beginning phase, that was probably some of the best work that I've done in establishing the foundation of this stuff. You know, I tried to combine the two things I loved. It was art and business. I learned business by watching people like John Johnson and Bob Johnson, who, you know, John Johnson with Johnson Publishing had the most profoundly impactful media outlet for Black people and people in general that has ever been created.
Ever.
And Bob Johnson, who, you know, did it with music and videos and television. And I think I was watching, but not really watching intentionally to build. I think I was watching, and then I felt inspired to build. And so I just took some of the things that I learned from those experiences about business, and I added those to the thing that I love about art. And that became the formula for a little Black girl.
Yeah. You know, I think if somebody asked me, you know, look at Monica Haslip and tell me what would you learn from her? What do you think she can teach people? You know, I would really tell people, you need but watch her. And the reason I say that is because, you know, you are someone who is reflective, and I think a lot of us waste time. I've known you to be somebody who, while it may seem that you might be wasting time, you're the most silent worker I've ever known, because your wheels are always turning. Even if you're doodling, your doodling turns into measurements and directions and space. And I mean, I still think about things that amaze me. And when I come here and see something you've done or heard something that you say, my mind goes back. And it is amazing. I think that the things that you offer, not just the children, but particularly the children, and the people who come into your spaces, really is amazing. People know you by not even your own artwork that you've created, but the spaces you've created for other people to build art, but you do so much more. Now, I don't know how many of our listeners are aware of the whole Georgetown situation, when Georgetown was in the news, and about the slaves that they purchased in order to get money. I don't even know the full details of all the story, but what I do know about the aftermath of that coming out into the public was that of all the people that could have been called around the country, people reached into Chicago and tapped you, Monica Haslip, to come in and facilitate conversations between the descendants of those slaves, and I think it's GW 272,
GU 272.
GU 272. You facilitated conversations between those slaves and the Jesuit priests that were the foundation of what Georgetown is. And this was not one or two conversations. This was, talk to us about that, what that was like.
You know, I know you are great at what you do because you had to dig to find that. I really don't. You know, it's interesting. A lot of my work that I do now really is about holding space for people to have difficult conversations. And I started working with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation probably about 14 years ago through this amazing woman named Dr. Gail Christopher. And Dr. Christopher was really a vice president at Kellogg at the time. And I was a grantee. She invited me to be a grantee for the organization. And I learned about her work. And that work, she sort of identified a group of people around the country that she trained to be racial healing practitioners. And I was one of those folk. And so I said to her, I say to her now even, I don't know how you picked me. But anyway, that opportunity to be trained by her, it opened up a way for me to really deepen my own understanding of myself first, and then develop a practice of how to hold space for people to have hard conversations. And so I did some training of other racial healing practitioners around the country for a few years. And then I started getting some calls from different institutions, and they called on me to do the work with the GU 272. And that work was really profound work because it helped me, as a descendant myself, understand how powerful it is to build relationships, and the importance of building and deepening relationships so people could see their humanity and to deal with all the challenges that racism has presented to all of us.
So building relationships even with those who you have vastly different ideologies with.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, the descendants of the enslaved 272 people, those descendants, you know, they were a family, and a newly formed family in some ways, because they've been finding each other over the years. And so having a conversation with them about, you know, sort of the desires of their hearts as a collective, you know, that was one sort of relationship that I had to build with them. The Jesuits, you know, it was sort of the top Jesuits from around the country who had been a part of this conversation with Georgetown University to really deal with some atonement and figure out how to not only think about it from a reparation type perspective, but how do you deal with just the trauma and all the other issues that came out of the enslavement of people, and how those descendants are still dealing with the repercussions, just like the rest of us, of that system of slavery.
How difficult was for it, and not to ask you to share anything that, you know, shouldn't be, how difficult is it for anyone in that situation to acknowledge, and not just acknowledge, but act on the acknowledgement of your forefathers' actions?
It's very difficult, but I think one of the things that is important is when we can come to these conversations as individuals and not necessarily always representing the seat of power we're in, but actually as the person, then that person can really begin to reflect on their own life. They get to build relationships with someone who is considered the other, and that helps to establish their understanding of how ridiculous racism is, as well as it helps us to begin to see our common humanity. And so that is a process, so I was very blessed and fortunate to spend quite a bit of time with that community and hold space for them and really kind of create the right kind of container for those hard conversations to happen. And so as a result, they formed a foundation. That foundation is raising resources that will be used for the descendants. And but it's a journey. It's one of those things that I always say that healing is something that we have to continue to work on, and it's a journey. And so racial healing itself is something that we have to be committed to perpetually, because we have to keep working on it. And so I've been in a lot of really amazing rooms and holding space for a lot of hard conversations all over the country, very quietly, and it's funny, that part of my work is, it's something that I just, I think it just evolved. It was a part of what I was supposed to be doing, perhaps. And I keep getting calls, and it's simply because I show up only to offer as much love as possible.
And I can't help but listen to you talk about that, and how much that work is now a part of you, and wonder for the rest of everyone listening, we live in a time today, and I could go down a list of names of people who have died by gun violence and many other things. But certainly since the death of, Sandra Bland and George Floyd, and the country has had a reckoning to deal with. And I think that so many people are engaged in protest in one form or another, from the way they do their artwork, from the way they do their speeches, to theater, the way people write, the way composers are composing music. A lot of it is in that vein of protest. And I wonder, based on the things that you're talking about, I think about protest versus engagement.
Sure.
Right? Like, a lot of people are trying to accomplish a lot through protest, but is that like where we really should be? What is possible if we spent less time protesting and more time engaging?
Well, I always believe that we need a full toolbox. And that toolbox should be complex. I think the folk that are actually on the front lines, protesting on our behalf, there is no greater gift that they could give to us, which is to, make that level of commitment and sacrifice. But I think we also have to have several other types of interventions and other ways to deal with it. And so the work that I do, I consider it heart work, which means that, I can deal with the head stuff, but I actually need to try to touch your heart. Because some of the folk that are sitting in these seats of power you know, some of the other interventions are not working for them. And so reaching them and touching their humanity and helping them to see themselves in other people who are not necessarily like them, that is also a very important part of what's in the toolbox. We've got to do it all. We can't do just one part, because that one part is not sustainable. If we only did protest, then we keep repeating the same cycles. If we are doing protests along with all the other interventions, including healing, then we have a greater opportunity to actually end racism. Because I think people, hearts are changed. And if you see me in a different way, then you are more likely to make a different decision when you're positioned to do that. So racial healing for me is not just about the light-hearted, beautiful relationship building. Those relationships are built to change policy.
That's right.
To
and
transform.
Systems.
To change systems. And so when we are thoughtful and strategic about these things, and we're including all the tools we have, and the more we stop, trying to set a value for what's important or what's not important, and really realize that it's all important, then I think we can actually progress, and we can make a difference.
Now, we talk about racial healing. I think about all the healing that must take place under this roof.
Yeah.
Where does creativity fall in all of that? I mean, art is not just drawing and painting, although it is that. It's music, it's performance, but it's creativity. It's a part of our brain that not a lot of our upbringing, directs us toward.
Yeah.
So how do people tap into that? And we put a lot of focus on kids, but there are a lot of adults who I think if we could tap into our creative side more, we'd probably be a lot better people and have more to offer. What role do you think creativity plays, and how do adults find it?
I mean, it plays a huge role. I mean, I think everything that we love originates with creativity, whether it's music or art or, technology or whatever. So I think the invitation to be lifelong learners, and to, one thing that Black people don't often get an opportunity to do is explore. We don't get to create things in ways that we're not under the gaze of others. And so what I've been trying to do here in this part of my career is to create an environment that is conducive for leaders and people who are creatives to explore and to perhaps make mistakes. Because what we haven't had the luxury of is the value of what's in those mistakes, because we've always been judged when those mistakes are made. And so it creates this fear where people don't go as far as they could potentially go, because they're trying to make sure that they look a certain way in order to either not lose their grant money or, not get, lose their position, their leadership position. But, we've got to get a little bit more open to exploration and discovery so we can innovate and ideate. We also have to rest. This whole thing about, I've learned more about how much working and just being so focused on that is connected to colonialism and
It's so true.
we gotta rest.
My grandmother would say, all motion ain't progress.
That's right. That's real. Yeah, so I'm trying to also create a place of refuge and rest for people. So they can come to a place and experience joy, like all the laughter you hear in the background, that's a regular here.
Yeah.
Because I believe joy and peace and rest and all those things are just as important as the work we're doing. You know, and you can't, when I travel a lot because my wife is a singer. So we are in Europe a lot, and I think the opportunity to go out into the world and see how other people are living and have that experience gives me more to bring back. And so I always encourage folk to find ways to take those breaks for yourself, go out and explore and see what's happening in the world, and it will make your world bigger. Whatever you're working on and whatever you're creating becomes a lot more rich as a result of the experience of being out in the world and seeing how other people are living.
You talk a lot about the work, and let's go back to some of the work that you started in your house and looking at the work that you're doing today under Little Black Pearl. I'd like to know how much of that, from the after-school programs to the design center, the academy, through Carver 47, the programs that you started in the beginning, do those programs still exist?
They're all infused in everything. It's the basis of everything.
Growth.
It's just an expansion of what was in my house. We still do after school programs, we still do summer programs. I have the high school, Carver is about expanding the narrative.
Listeners, if you're in Chicago, Carver 47 is unlike any boutique style lunch, coffee shop, brunch, gallery, gift shop, library, networking place. It is all of that.
Yeah.
And I know you designed that space.
I did.
When I walked in, I said, oh my goodness, this is Monica. Her hand is all over this, because it's a very small space.
Yeah.
But there is so much in that space.
Yeah.
So when I think about what you said, it's infused. What you did initially is infused all over this building.
Sure.
That room, I believe that everything in this place is infused in that one small room.
Yeah, in ways. I mean, in the center of that space is anchored by a Red Wagon. And that Red Wagon was the first wagon that I had in the basement of my house that our students in the after-school program would sell their artwork from.
Oh.
So when I started designing that space, I wanted that space, the heart of that space, to be held by that wagon, because that wagon represents everything we're about. So a lot of my design work is infusing story and infusing the narrative that I want to have people experience. Dr. Carver, in the space we're in now, I wanted to build a business model because I was curious if I could build a business model where I could expand his narrative, but I could also bring a diverse group of people, attract a diverse group of people to a restaurant or a cafe, and it worked. You know, we have a very, very diverse customer base. And I was thinking about gentrification. This neighborhood is changing. I wanted to be sort of that bridge. I also wanted people to recognize the value of what was already here. You know, so, and I also wanted us and people outside of our community to know that Dr. Carver was way more than a peanut man.
It's so true.
So, you know, I embed a lot of his story in everything, from wallpaper to, you know, the menu. And so I think that is a way for us to start thinking about ways to expand narratives about Black people and the role we play.
How important is the knowledge of one's story? I'm real big on identity, historical identity, ethnic identity, and feel like whether you're Black or white or yellow, you've got to tap into at some point in your life your ethnic identity, like who you are, and all of what that means. And a lot of people are encouraged to tap into an ethnic identity, but not necessarily their own. You know, when I think about the kids, again, who come through your spaces, what are you teaching them through the curriculums in the different programs about themselves?
Well, you know, that's an important question. I mean, for me, we intentionally think about ways to help them use their experience here in education to learn about themselves and to learn about their family and to learn about their history. So we have a lot of different ways that they get to that. They get to that through music. We have a recording studio in here that they use to kind of investigate for themselves, you know, their story and their narrative through music. We do it through poetry. We do it through visual arts. They have very specific jobs and roles that they have to play through our partnerships with a lot of our corporate partners. We do a lot of footwear and apparel design work with our young people, and that is an investigative experience where they have to you know, respond to briefs that are given to us by our clients. And those briefs often have them look at their lives, look at their communities, and to produce creative product that highlight that. And so we try to understand that young people learn in different ways, and we try to find as many ways as possible for them to tap into the thing that they love, so they want to learn. They spend a lot of time, like they had a senior project a couple of weeks ago, and it was so inspiring for me because they wrote a letter to their young self, and then they also highlighted their future and what they had a vision for themselves. And it was just powerful because it let me know that what they got while they were here was, you know, some pride and some clarity about, you know, how valuable they are. And, you know, the thing I always tell them, they laugh about it, I always say, you know, I love you. Because if nobody is saying it, they at least get it from me and from the people in this space. And so, and sometimes that's what they need, you know. And
so what are you most proud of under the Little Black Pearl Workshop? When I look at the ecosystem here, I'm sure you mentioned poetry. You have sound recording. I know you started in the beginning you were teaching the business of art. I know with
We
Chicago
still do.
West Community Music Center, the sponsors of the Black Muse podcast, is all about the business of music. And what else do you offer here?
Well, we
Pottery, I see.
we offer a lot of different things, but I think it's such a complex ecosystem, and it's really designed to be that way because I think that tapping into or having opportunities for people to tap into the things that they love. So we do culinary arts through the cafe. We do it. We're building out a catering kitchen upstairs for workforce development for adults. We have glass blowing, which is kind of a world that we typically don't have access to. We really try to, we do events, we do Pearl Fest, we do Black Unplugged, which are music events where we bring in really incredible artists and musicians for performances. And so
And you hold them here at
we
this
hold them here.
space?
We hold Black Unplugged here, but we also do Pearl Fest out on the lakefront. So that event brings out between 5,000 and 20,000 people. And so we've done that every other year for the past probably 15 or more years. And so, you know, I think it's really important to me to have some complexity in what we're doing. You know, I learned early on that we can't, in order to sustain, you have to have some different streams. And those streams should stay connected to your mission and to what you're doing. But we should always have more than one stream of revenue because we can't, you know, everything has to feed the work.
Yeah, there's actually a Japanese business model that is exactly like that. It begins with a K. Of course, I can't think of the name of it now, but it is. Every piece of a business, and they're all vastly different, but they're all interconnected, certainly, through financing.
And you know, it's funny you said that. I took a flight from Los Angeles to Chicago before I started Little Black Pearl. And I sat next to a guy who was a Japanese businessman who owned a lot of real estate in downtown LA. And he was telling me that he came to this country with almost nothing. And then he owned all these high rises. So I asked him, I said, if there was anything you could tell me as I'm going into thinking about business, what would be the main point that you would tell me I need to be mindful of? And he said two things. He said, he or she who owns land is king or queen. He said, so you must own your property. He said, and the second thing is you have to have a diverse portfolio. And your portfolio needs to be diverse enough for when one thing is down, something else might be up. And so that always stuck with me. It always stuck with me that I needed to stress the importance of owning our spaces and stress the importance of, you know, what those spaces offer to us. And then the other thing was, you know, I learned the hard way in some ways that, you know, I had to have a diverse portfolio. So when, you know, in 2008, when the bottom dropped out of everything, I had to create events and let the building itself help to take us through that tough period. So, you know, I learned that from experience.
I commend you. One, I don't know if it's, obviously it's God ordained, but I think about a lot of people do things for the money, for the love of money. And you've always done things for others, with others in mind. And you've been I think rewarded for that. And it's a lesson to be learned for sure for folk. You have a lot of successes and a lot of accomplishments here in 2023. What are you afraid of?
I have to tell you, I am not afraid of anything. What I have concerns about is, given this climate and the polarization of, this country and the work that I'm doing, I believe, because you have to believe that racism can end in order for that to happen. So I believe it can end, but what I am concerned about often is us being ready. Our readiness.
Yes.
And
I get that.
what are we doing to make sure that when that opportunity presents itself and we've done the work to end racism, are our people ready? Have we prepared them to take on these new systems that we need to build? And so that's the thing that I think about now. I think about, the bench. What kind of bench is there in my industry? And when I finish doing this, who comes behind me? And are they ready? And am I leaving them an organization that is healthy enough for them to pick up and move to the next phase? So that's the stuff that I think about, and that I could say I'm concerned about, but I'm not afraid of it, because I do believe that we have extraordinary people who are building new organizations and doing great things. My intention at this part of my career is to share as much as I can with what I've learned and what I've experienced, so it can help whoever's coming behind me. I think the work that I'm doing in racial healing, I'm very invested in that work, because I think we've got to have hard conversations, and we've got to have people who can facilitate them without folk using the excuse of it being too hard to stop, to stop even talking. And so I'm looking forward to continuing that body of work too. I'm concerned about our children, and I think that we've got a lot of work to do to help education become more relevant for them, because we're operating education as if it's still 1940, and our children are getting left behind because we're not preparing them for the 21st century and what is right in front of us around technology and everything else. So I'm really, those are the things I think about, and those are the things that I'm probably most concerned about.
Good. I hope that some of your conversations take you in the space of early childhood education, because I'm a firm believer that those ages from 1 to 3, and particularly in our community, are wasted. They're the most important years of a human being, and a lot of kids spend that time simply playing and just, but nothing structured, and there's so much that can be done in those years. Now, as we wind down, because we could talk for hours, there was a time when you could look outside and hear the roar of what sounded like what's about to come to Chicago in a couple of weeks, NASCAR, but it would be a little black Alfa Romeo Spider with the music blasting, and it would be Rachel Farrell or Diane Reeves or Sarah Vaughan, and at the wheel is none other than Ms. Monica Haslip.
That's right. That's
Do
right.
you
It
still have
happens.
that Alfa Romeo?
It still happens. Yes, I still have my Spider, my Alpha. It was a gift from my mom, so I can't get rid of it. My nephew has claimed it, so I told him, once it leaves me, it will definitely come to you. But I haven't been able to give it up yet. So I'm still driving around, music loud, as I was doing in the past.
Really, what musicians inspire you today?
Oh gosh,
and vocalists.
I am in love with a lot of people. I have to say that my wife is Liz Wright, and she's my favorite. Not because of who she is, but because I love her music. I love Terry Lynn Carrington, who's a great friend, and Esperanza Spalding, and Diane Reeves, and I have so many people that I really just love. There's so much music out here now that is really powerful. That's a whole nother category of healing work that's being done.
Yeah.
And young folk that are changing the game in music is also inspiring to me. Watching them, force the music industry to do what they do in a different way, in a more sort of. I don't think the industry has quite gotten where it needs to be with equity, but young people are really challenging them and really finding ways to deal directly.
In what way
audiences.
would you say? I know when we talked about hip hop, and then hip hop went to rap, and people talked about those changes, and then we had the fights about the lyrics and the devaluing of women, and what kind of changes are being spearheaded by young people today in music?
Well, I think because this is a time where they are doing more curating. They're curating their lives. They're curating their fashion. They're curating their music. They're curating everything. And so I think that is changing how the industry is able to sort of communicate with the artists. So artists are now have a lot more control of the relationship they have with their audience, because it's more direct because of social media and everything else. So young people are driving that.
Yeah, I remember when John Legend came out, and when he came out of Wharton School of Business and used to sell CDs out of the trunk of his car. But I remember when he was put on the cover of Fast Track magazine, and one of the things they said about him was how he changed the game by cutting out the middleman and going direct, as you say.
Yes.
I remember Alicia Keys when she turned down that first contract and said, "I'm not ready." And what it really was, she didn't like the direction they were trying to force her into, and she waited.
That's right.
Until she could have her own voice and curate what was in her heart and soul. I get it.
Yeah, I love that about them, and and people. There's a lot of conversation about young people and lyrics, and I think some of it is, it's not my taste, but it's all about storytelling, and many of the things that they are talking about are relevant to the lives they're living, and so as much as I can't relate to it. It's a story that's being told that really resonates with folk who are having that experience. And so I think the encouragement for them to keep, moving in a positive direction and having that narrative.
Creating their own narrative, because he or she who holds the pen holds the power.
Yeah. And it's we have to be able to take in an expansive narrative.
Yeah.
It can't always be what we're comfortable with. I remember things I used to listen to, my mom would be like, turn that off. But so I have to try to keep that in my head because I know, you know, some of what they're talking about, I don't condone nor do I understand. But I still think they have the right to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last business question.
Yeah.
How do you see AI playing a role in the future of Little Black Pearl?
You know, I think AI is going to play a role in the future of everything.
I do too.
And so I'm personally exploring it now. You know, I'm exploring it in relationship to my own art. So some of the design work that I'm doing, I'm dealing with some AI because I think I want to feel comfortable understanding. I think it has some very challenging and scary potentials if there are no boundaries put around it. But I think we should be trying to understand what is happening with it because it is important for us to stay in front of things and not always being pulled behind. And so I say that it's like everything else. Anything that's like done with no boundaries can always become like a nightmare for us. But you know, if we can get people to pay attention to what the folk who are actually creating this technology are saying, which is this is very dangerous without some boundaries. If we can get folk to pay attention to that, then I think we can begin to shape it in a way that it could be a productive thing for us. But you know, you don't ever know the direction that it's going to go. You know, so I'm just trying to learn and make sure I'm aware of what I know what I'm looking at. And I've tested it myself, you know, so I'm playing with it. I'm incorporating it in some of my work because I wanna see and you know, we're not in it enough for it to not have biases.
And well,
so
the biases are in its very design.
Yes, and so as a result, you know, we have to find ways to counteract that.
So I have a word for you.
Yeah.
Spellcaster. When I think of AI, the future of AI, and I think about the kids who are learning code today, that's going to be obsolete once AI goes mainstream. And the next, what's going to take the place of coding is spellcasting. And what I mean by that is the ability to truly understand the search engines of AI. Because if you can understand that design, and get into the mind of those, that's what's going to make you valuable in organizations and the implementation of it in projects. And
and that's what we have to spend time on. I mean, because it's an expansive tool. And so when you think about it, there's so much that it moves out from. Like the seed is just the seed, and it's so much bigger. So I think just really understanding that and understanding how that operates in our lives, you know, and knowing how it's being used and how that impacts us, that's important. That's important for us.
Well, we started this conversation. You talked about you always having an eye toward the future. So I'd like to end the conversation on what that future might look like from this point.
Wow. You know what? I love thinking about the future, but I live very much in the present. So I try to not get too far ahead of myself. I am very open-minded, so I'm thinking about a whole bunch of different things. You know, it must be the Gemini in me. So I have lots of things swirling around in my head about a lot of things, you know, so I think the future for me is, you know, having a sort of peaceful life that really focus a bit more on my own well-being and my own rest and my I'm very mindful now of how I'm choosing to share and so, you know, I think the future is not feeling obligated to, you know, have an answer. You know, I am enjoying the liberation of being present.
I love that.
Yeah.
Enjoying just the state of being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I think about the future, is when I want to muse and when I want to, you know, let my mind be open. But I really completely love and value and appreciate being present.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I want to thank you for joining me and Black Muse podcast today. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I know our listeners are going to be overjoyed.
Good, thank you. I appreciate it. It's
welcome.
It's been fun. Yeah, it's good to see you too.
I know, it's been great. It's a reunion.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's it, folks. We have had this wonderful conversation with Monica Haslip, the visionary behind so many things, but of course, Little Black Pearl Workshop. Why don't you give the website and the address of Little Black Workshop so people can dig in a little deeper?
Well, the website is www.blackpearl.org. And the phone number for those of you who are still calling, it's 773-285-1211. We're on the corner of 47th and Greenwood in Chicago on the south side, address 1060 East 47th Street. Come by and see us. Carver 47 is c47.com.
Excellent, excellent. Make sure you write those down and take a listen, give a like at the end of the program. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Doris Davenport, Black Muse correspondent, sponsored by the Chicago West Community Music Center.